Welcome to the Deeper Into Movies podcast. My name is Stephen T. Hanley. I'm the founder and lead creator of Deeper Into Movies. Today on the podcast, I'm joined by director Ben Wheatley. This was a cool talk. Ben jumped on pretty last minute to talk about his new movie, In the Earth. It's his new horror movie. It's also the 10th year anniversary of Kill List. So I had to talk about that fantastic movie. And we spoke about Moviedrome. For those of you who don't remember, Moviedrome was a film series on the BBC where director Alex Cox and later Mark Cousins picked a movie each week. And in pre-internet times, this was an amazing gateway drug where they would pick really cool cult movies every week. So that was a really formative experience in being a movie nerd. Ben is a really cool guy and he works super fast, which is really interesting for you filmmakers out there if you want to take some notes as to how this maniac manages to make films in 8 days to 2 weeks. It's fucking crazy. Anyway, here is me and Ben Wheatley. So my first question is usually what you grew up watching, but I know, like me, you grew up watching Moviedrome, which is a really important show in British film culture for most of us who watched it.
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky enough to talk to Alex Cox a few years ago, and I, just had to thank him wholeheartedly for that. I think for me it was like a mixture of Moviedrome and what was it, the movie show as well, wasn't there? That played around the same time. Is that what it's called? Or cinema?
Oh, I never caught that.
Yeah, there was another one which was like the more serious. It was dealing with more art films than genre films, and then it was I know I completely misnamed this as well, but the Jonathan Ross thing, the Incredibly Strange Picture Show. Is that what it was
That
called?
was good. His book was really cool too. I don't know if you ever bought his book where he had a spin-off book and it had like big chapters on Russ Meyer, Argento, Abel Ferrara,
Lynch.
Really good taste.
I mean, I think that was the really important one on that for me was the Raimi one where they showed Within the Woods and his early kind of short film, Super 8 films and stuff. And I think that was when you could see that and make that connection and go, oh, right, that's a guy who was as far from the Hollywood filmmaking system as possible, but with the help of his mates, made a movie that then made him into a major filmmaker. You say, well, it's not as impossible as it seems from the outside,
And I really liked how extra Alex would always be with his intros, and even he had like interesting backdrops and stuff for each of his films and stuff. He'd really like make a scene of it. I remember in Terminator, he was in like some like industrial scrapyard.
Yeah, and isn't that the one where he goes on about Terminator 2 being two Arnold Schwarzeneggers? So at that point, they hadn't developed it in the way that it was finally finished. So I was like, I always thought that was interesting how he talks about that. I don't know where he'd heard that from.
Yeah, and the Assault on Precinct 13 one was really cool, where he's like, at the end, he's like doing a lookout, like he's about to get sniped by something. It's kind of goofy, but even when he did The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, he even just said, "This is great, but I'll be straight with you, it's too long." But
yeah, it's quite bold.
Ballsy. Yeah,
yeah. Oh, yeah. I think he complains quite a lot about Diva as well, doesn't he?
Yes. For the first time, I've been after them for 20 years, but I found both Moviedrome books on eBay for about £10 each. But the quest is over after 20 years of searching and never bothering to get off my ass and send a stamped address envelope and check back in the 80s and 90s.
But I think the weird thing of the thing I found out about it, which I didn't realize, was that I always thought he'd chosen the films and like sought them out specifically, but really the dark secret of it all was that there
Oh
were
no.
films that were there at the BBC under license, and they were trying to find a way of putting them on, and that's how he pitched the show. So he kind of there was a grab bag of all these weird movies, but
Right.
they were already there in the BBC. They weren't chosen. They were curated by him and chosen by him from that list, but they weren't specifically gone out and got. If you know what I mean.
Okay. That's some good cuts though. Some really good deep cuts considering.
Yeah, it's great stuff.
We tried to get him and Mark Cousins to do a double bill on the podcast, but Mark Cousins looking back, doesn't like his curation.
Oh, well, the films that he chose.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think he's evolved to a kind of a different headspace and stuff, and less kind of cult and trash, and he doesn't feel too hot about his choices, but I think it should be celebrated.
Yeah, totally.
But I was wondering, since Field in England and Happy New Year both broadcast on TV, is it things like Movie Drone that made you want to broadcast on TV still, considering the whole film landscape has kind of changed so much since then? But I was wondering what appealed to you about the idea of a broadcast.
It's more about the kind of longevity of the film in a way. It's like, so when you've got like something like Colin Burstead, you're looking at it going, well, where's it going to go? You know, it can go, maybe it'll get a 30 screen release or a 100 screen release in the UK. And then after that, there'll be if it's still going, there'll be a Blu-ray release, and then it will get onto television. So that's its life. And how many at each point in that life, it will determine how many more viewers it's going to get. So chances are that version of the release, it doesn't get seen by that many people. It might be, people might really like it, but there'll never be a big audience for it. But if you go, oh well, let's stick it on TV, the TV audience is ginormous. So you've got like Colin Burstead was seen by about 2 million people over that first week, something like that. And you go, well, that's if that was box office, it would be like a smash hit. It'd be huge. So in that respect, you kind of go, well, in a way, if you can get it out to that many people, it's got more of a chance then to disseminate into culture than it does if you're doing a kind of quite small, bespoke kind of release. So those are the things that go through your head. You're like, well, you want it to be seen by a lot of people, and there's a compromise there to be had sometimes.
And how was the response to Field in England? That must have been pretty fun to have a psychedelic film about the English Civil War in black and white being broadcast into people's homes.
Yeah, it was bonkers, and it was that film it applies to even more. You know, it's like that would never was going to be seen by anybody unless we did something radical with it. I mean, and that release pattern helped us a lot. You know, to be day and date, but also free on TV at the same time it got out to the maximum amount of audience, and that had come from like thinking about. I think I saw a thing about Shane Meadows' Dead Man's Shoes, and it had been Dead Man's Shoes had done all right at the cinema, but it wasn't spectacular. But when it was shown on Film 4, it had that's when the kind of real audience came to it, and seen by by a factor of 100 more people, and I thought, well, what if we could get that audience first before, so we didn't have to wait 6 months for that to happen, and hit it all at once, and maybe that the audience in the TV audience will feed back into the cinema audience, and then there'll be like a loop of people talking about it. It didn't work quite like that in the end, but we did get a big audience for a film which is decidedly and aggressively weird.
And I think you said working in TV and all those tight schedules made you really effective in shooting and directing and getting stuff done so quickly, which I'm wondering, is that why you're so fast when you're making your films? Did you just kind of work up those strengths in working like Ideal and things like that, where you have super tight deadlines?
Yeah, I mean, Ideal was sharpened everything up for me. It was the first kind of things I'd done before that were more like sketch shows and comedy sketch shows, and that was like comedy drama. So it is like making a film, but like on speed. You know, you've got kind of quite a lot of, and also because there's so many characters in it, you're always confronted with a scene with like 6 people in it. Like every other hour, you've got to deal with that, or up to 8 people in a room, all talking to each other. And it's it gives me the absolute heebie-jeebies, because it's like to work out all the sight lines and how to block that stuff is absolutely terrifying. And I was like up all night, kind of just drawing it out and trying to work it out. And I had these DVDs which were called American Blocking, or Hollywood Blocking, it was called, and it just shows you how to, like, shots from Hollywood classics and how they constructed them. And then I'd watch those, and then I'd go into Ideal and like try bits of them out, because you were churning through so much material all the time, so that really helped. And I like that thing of like, it's half an hour. You shoot half an hour a week on a TV show usually, and then you've got a week to edit half an hour. So if you apply that to film, then it means you've got a 3-week shoot with a 3-week edit, and then it's done. And that's kind of what happened on stuff like Sightseers and Kill List.
How was it then what was the shoot length on Rebecca? Were you still working at your typical super fast pace, or did you slow down?
Rebecca is, what was it in the end, 12 weeks or something? But it's a weird one, because what it is, it's not really. If you look at the faster movies, they're designed to be shot fast, so they're often single location. So Rebecca was still shot quite fast, but just in really amazing locations all over the place. So and that's what I found interesting about doing bigger stuff, or even just the difference between doing Ideal and Down Terrace was on Down Terrace, we shot it in 8 days, but we had as much time with the actors as we would do on 3 weeks on Ideal, because we decided not to light it in the same way. And so Ideal was lit in a kind of 3-point classic Hollywood style. So there'd be backlights and kickers and all that stuff, and that stuff takes time. It's painstaking. So, and every time you move the camera, it takes half an hour to reset it. Most times, and on Down Terrace it didn't, so it was quick. But then, and so with Rebecca, you have all this extra time, but then it all disappears again. So you have almost less time with the actors than you might have done on a lower budget film.
Do you think you prefer your fast way of shooting, or is it all the same?
It's not the same, but it is. They're different challenges all the time, and they're all enjoyable. So it's a different thing again when you're shooting an ad, which is 30 seconds that you're shooting in a day. And I remember the first ad I did, I think, oh my God, I've got all the time in the world. How do people stretch it out and look busy for a whole day? And then you're like, at the end of the day, everyone's running around like mad, and you still haven't shot it all, and it's a nightmare. And there's just different levels of concern, you can get into. So like on a low budget film that's shot out in 15 days, there's less grip work, there's less dollying and less cranes and all those complicated things that take time to get right. But then, you go into once you start getting technocranes out and stuff, we call them like time thieves. What was it? Or the other one, was it the motion capture machine? The cameras are called overtime machines. You get them out, you're going to be going over, it's going to cost a fortune.
Do you get many young directors asking you for advice of how you shoot so quickly and efficiently? Because I was thinking, my friend was just recording his album, and I was like, do it quick. Like Bruce Springsteen recorded his album in 5 days, and he's like, yeah, it's a fucking E Street band, so they can just totally knock it out in that speed. So I was wondering what advice he gives people who want to work quickly but maybe haven't had the time to develop that kind of muscle like you have in filmmaking. And
it's tricky. I think shooting on your phone is good, prepping. I mean, when I started, I didn't really do as much prep as I do now. So I would do shot lists a bit, but I would wing it. And some of the low budget stuff you end up winging because you can't control the environment anyway. So there's no point being too specific about what you're going to do going in, because you're never going to be able to do that, and then that can really throw you. You go, on the day, you're like, oh shit, all my plans are out the window, and now I've got to make it up. So you might as well just make it up from scratch as you start. But as I've gone on, I've become more neurotic, so I kind of storyboard everything. And I find with that, if you storyboard, and not just action, everything, dialogue, anything going in and out of a door, or what the characters are, the cutaways, or anything. And so then you get this massive wad of paper, and you can go through it, and you can put yourself in a trance and see the film. And it's the cheapest way of doing it. It takes a lot of resource in terms of your time, but it's definitely worth doing. But then you don't take that on set necessarily, and but you've already had a go at directing the film once, so you've got a bit more. You're giving yourself a bit more of a chance, and it's something to fall back on when you're shooting it on the floor.
For In the Earth, you said you were watching a lot of horror movies in lockdown.
Yeah, I actually did. I started off by not watching anything, to be honest. I just didn't feel like watching anything, and I kind of watched. The first thing we watched was was Terror, the thing in Antarctica TV show, and it was so good. It was really hard to watch anything else after that. But then I started watching towards the end, before we shot the film. I was watching a bit of Harryhausen movies, like 20 Million Miles from Earth, and 20,000 Fathoms, The Creature from 20,000 Fathoms, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I was really enjoying them, and I was going, God, why don't I used to love those films when I was a kid. I don't know why I didn't watch more of them, and then we watched Phase 5, and then I ended up watching some Fulci stuff. And that was a weird grab bag of stuff, but I don't know. It's stuff I enjoyed, or stuff I hadn't indulged myself in for a while, and I felt like, oh yeah. And we watched Quatermass as well, like the John Mills Quatermass movie, and they all kind of found their way into In the Earth in different areas, I think.
And you saw the Halloween shooting schedule, is that right? You saw how quickly that was shot, and you thought that was a eureka moment for you in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about it for a while, like the idea that there are blueprints out there for how to make films, and maybe if you just limit yourself to those, if you found a film which is amazing like Halloween, and you found out how it was made, you've not really got any excuses when you find out it's 20 days or whatever it is. And like their budget was similar to our budget, adjusted for inflation. So I was like, well, that, if you can make a masterpiece like that, then that you don't, you can't feel sorry for yourself, and you're not on the back foot. It feels like, I've seen like reviews of people saying, oh, it's 15 days and it's like, really low budget and da-da-da. But these aren't the films that all of horror are built on are that cheap. Mm-hmm. And we're shot that quickly or quicker, so it's not really a thing. And it's like the idea that can be a problem for the filmmaking is, I think it doesn't make any sense to me,
How is it shooting so quickly but keeping in all the COVID safety protocols and things like that? I'm guessing it was a little bit easier because you were outside.
Yeah, and that wasn't a mistake, by an accident. We did that. We planned that, and to do it outside to make our lives easier in terms of COVID and safer, So we'd looked at, if you're shooting inside at that point, you had to have like these fogging machines that kind of squirt detergent everywhere, and then every surface has to be cleaned that the actors touch, and it's just a nightmare, And certainly at a low budget, you wouldn't be able to facilitate it. You'd have to have the crew would almost double in size to do that, So, but there was a lot of concern about how hard it was going to be, but in many ways, COVID helped, So there's stuff like we didn't have a central office that we worked from. It was all done by Zoom, and actually Zoom turns out to be doing it as video conferences much faster. So that was good. Little things like you don't queue for food anymore. You write down what you're going to eat and put it in that night before, and then it comes to you in the box. And so a lot of the stuff that would slow you down, like trooping off to canteens and coming back, is all just eliminated. So that stuff was good. And then, it's mask wearing and hand washing. And like the mask wearing, I thought I was going to have a problem with, because it was just felt a bit restrictive, and your shortness of breath and stuff. But by the second day, I didn't even notice it, and everyone was super conscientious about it. So it was fine. And we had no problems.
You've said you used to have nightmares about the woods. So how was it filming a survival horror film in the woods for you? Was it cathartic in a way, or just really fucking scary? Or
no, as an adult, I'm not so frightened. I mean, it's hard to be frightened when you're with 25 people. It's very unlikely something's going to happen to you, I'd have thought. And it was quite interesting because when we did the recce's for the location, there's loads of wild animals there, and there's loads of deer, and the deer would be asleep underneath like low trees and stuff, and then would suddenly leap out at you and run off. And that was like a bit, oh. But when we shot, the deer aren't stupid. They were miles away, because we made such a noise and kind of obviously smelled so much. So they were nowhere near. There was a bit of like weird fox screaming going on, but nothing to be too afraid of.
I can't get out of my head. Reese Shearsmith's scene in the tent is just spectacular, where he comes across almost instantly like a Glastonbury archetype hippie. And then it descends into the surgery and the torture and stuff. That was such a great scene. How was it editing all those different elements together for that scene?
Well, that one was like I was editing in the evening, so we'd shoot it and then just have a look at it in my hotel room. Usually with like some of the other crew would come in and, we'd have a chat about it and look at the work that we'd done. And it was all quite, everyone, it was always shocking, that sequence. And we worked from the first rough assembly. Everyone was, I knew it was going to work, but I knew it was going to work when I saw the prosthetics, because I can't even say it, prosthetics were so good, in the room, you touch them, you go, oh God, it's not a real foot, but it is. You get that weird dissonance and like, oh, I know it's not real, but it feels real. And empathy for a kind of a weird disembodied foot. And I mean, and I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed all that stuff, doing proper effects work like that.
It was just a great mix of comedy, slapstick, and just dread and tension. Really well assembled.
Yeah, that's what we were hoping for. And I wanted it to feel like, that you were trapped. You couldn't escape, and the time was almost like slowing down, and you were stuck in. It's like a nightmare of your feet stuck in treacle or something, and it's going to be bad, whatever it is, and you don't trust the film. The film is probably going to show you something horrific or worse. And I felt that when I watched it with an audience, I could feel that around me. Like people were, I think, a lot of people were not looking, couldn't look, and I think that the idea of what actually happened is probably much, much worse in their heads than the actual what was on screen.
Great performance from Joel Fry. He seems like such a sweet, sensitive guy, and to see him thrown into this environment just made it all the more sad and distressing to watch. Was that in the script, or was that just something he brought to it from his personal vibe?
Well, it's in the script to a degree, but also I know Joel. I'd worked with him before, and it was kind of written for him to a degree. I imagined it, or you often do this stuff where you retool the script slightly after you've cast it. But there's a thing about him where he's so kind of he's very real, and you almost feel like he's painfully real. Mm-hmm. That there's a kind of a line where it's like, is it just a guy who's been filmed rather than an actor, which is not in an insulting way, but and to get to that realism is very complicated for him to do. I know that, from watching him do it, but it is there's that, and then the other thing that was really amazing that he did was the measuring of the metering of the pain across the film, which I hadn't really even thought about when I was writing it, but how not to peak too early and how to show the different styles of the agony that he that he has, which was quite something, you know. And there was conversations about that, about, you know, what he was trying to do in moment to moment, and I thought, yeah, that was one of those moments in filmmaking where you kind of go, oh, yeah, maybe you know, not that I ever do really, but the underestimation of the craft of acting, and just go, shit, there's so much going on here, so hard to do.
Yeah, it was such a naturalistic performance, which is made it even more distressing to watch in the settings of a horror genre, where you really didn't know how it's going to play out. And also just horror that when you're injured and relying on the kindness of strangers, and you never knew anyone who was coming in as to what the intention was or where it was going to go, was really high end.
Yeah, and I think that thing of, there was conversation about, oh, you know, when Reese turns up as Zach, that, oh, of course well, they shouldn't go with him because he's obviously probably the one who beat them up in the first place. But you'd know that in that situation, it's about pragmatism, and there's not really any choices. You know, you just can't make it. And I was always thinking about that psychological thing of, like, you wouldn't get in a boiling bath, but you'd get in a tepid bath that got warmed up. Yes. As it slowly gets hotter and hotter, you wouldn't get out, you know. And I think that's what that is. It's like they really shouldn't go with him. They shouldn't do any of the things that they do, but they kind of, what else are they going to do, you know?
What kind of soundtracks were you listening to or speaking to Clint about for the sound design and for the score?
I don't know if I played him anything particularly, or that we looked at anything else. It was always more of a kind of a, we talked about, because the music had been written so much into the script, it wasn't like, oh, it sounds like so and so, or it's got this vibe from this movie. It's more like, what is the sound that Wendell's using to communicate with the plants? What will that be like? There was that side of it. There was also, you know, going back to the John Carpenter stuff, it's like, there's a reason why a lot of those movies have synth soundtracks, because it's a budgetary thing as much as anything. It's the first time I'd worked with Clint where usually what happens is he'll score it and then do demos, and then the demos will be then arranged and then recorded by an orchestra or something like that. This score is from Clint's fingers to digital to the movie. You know, it's like it's come out of his studio unfettered by that. There's been a little bit of work done on it, but it's not the same transformation as it usually happens. And I think that was really interesting, you know, and a lot of it, there was like, he'd deliver like kind of massive fat tracks, like 20-minute tracks of stuff. And we'd listen to those and go, oh yeah, this bit's really brilliant, this bit's good. And then something else again would turn up that's completely different. And then eventually what happens is, like, we had just like 2 days before we shot the film, a whole album's worth of music turned up. And as I edited the film while we were shooting it, we were putting Clint's music onto it, and experiencing it really, really loud in the room, in the hotel room, just going, oh my God, it's amazing. That stuff then went through another load of noodling changes and bits and bobs, but it was pretty fully formed, you know. Yesterday,
just to do my homework, I was rewatching Kill List, which is, I think it's 10 years old this year.
Yeah, it might be 11, yeah.
And I was just looking back, it was such a great, unique, singular vision that seems so confident. How is it when you're an early filmmaker holding you mentioned about holding your nerve and staying true to your vision, but I was wondering, in the early days of your career, how was the script received, or how was it holding on to all the things that make the film great, like what's unsaid and the way things slowly reveal as they reveal themselves to be contract killers, and how casually they pull out the weapons, and then the surreal elements come in, like the blood oath and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you make this stuff and you're kind of naive because you've never made anything before, so you don't know what you can do and what you can't do in terms of how you interact with other people when you make stuff. So on that film, I remember we rehearsed like the first 15 minutes because we had that house to film in, and I didn't like it, and I was like, Amy wasn't there; she was at home, I think. And I phoned her and said, it's not really working. So she went, all right, okay, I'll rewrite it. So she rewrote that whole opening 20 minutes, like on the fly on the Friday, probably, or something like that.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. And then we shot it. And then we sent, but then obviously the film 4 would be getting the rushes back. And they look at the rushes going, this isn't the script. What are you doing? And we were like, oh, no, we didn't like it. So we changed it. And now looking back on that, I think it's just unbelievable.
That's ballsy, yeah.
Yeah, well, it wasn't ballsy. It was just stupid. I just didn't know, didn't know you couldn't do that. So that there's stuff like that happens all the way through it, or just but everyone wasn't that. There wasn't like a massive confidence in it. I remember the other thing was like we made it, and then I don't know how we managed to do this, but no one ever, because I edited it in my house, that no one came to the edit or was allowed to come because it was in Brighton, it was too far to go. So they didn't really ever see it. And then we had this idea that you'd only deliver it once it was finished, not like a rough cut. You just go, and it's done, da-da, like that. So we did this screening. And everyone was appalled. And they're like, whoa. And we're like, yeah, that's it, it's done. Hey. And so there was a lot of conversation around that at that time. But it... And that kind of went on for a few movies where we were like that. But then by the time you get to, things change. You can't, if you're making low budget movies, you can work like that to a degree. But as the budgets creep up, it becomes harder to pull that off.
Were people on board with the tone of the film and all the elements you're juggling, like the occult stuff, the criminal stuff, and then the kind of the gritty family drama of it? There's a lot of weird elements going on.
Yeah, they didn't mind, I think. But I think we get like some weird notes occasionally. There, someone asks for, we want to see a map of the tunnels at the end,
right?
And I'm like, what are you talking about? There's no map for the tunnels. So they go, oh, we're not sure it makes sense how they go down those tunnels. And I'm like, if you're worried about that by that point in the movie, it's kind of over for you. But I think there wasn't. I think what it was that it was. I mean, I watched it recently as well, and I found the tone of it like one of the things that makes it different. I think is that it's unrelentingly mean in a way that most films aren't. It is so mean. They're all mean. Everyone's mean in it. They do mean stuff to each other. The film's mean on the audience. It's a bit punishing to the audience, and I think that's an attitude that it has that I don't really, not to be the biggest fan of my own film, but I don't see it in other stuff as much, Everything's a bit more, it's reasonable,
Yeah, this definitely has the most nihilistic tone, which is a compliment, I think. I got two more quick questions. You're working on the Meg 2.
Yeah.
What drew you to a big budget sequel?
I really like the Meg, so that was the main thing. And then when the script came to me, I thought, that'd be brilliant to do that. And I wanted to do a big studio thing, and I was moving in that direction. But it doesn't mean that I'm not doing other low budget stuff at the same time. So I don't see it as a kind of. And I've said this for years. It's not like a linear progression. It's not about that. It's more about taking your pleasures and finding stuff to do that you're excited about. And I think, I did some TV a couple of years ago, which was in LA, and got to shoot at Paramount, and I couldn't believe it. I shot stuff on the stages where they shot Vertigo.
Wow.
And I'm just like standing there going, this is unbelievable. This is so brilliant. And everyone's like, well, why are you, because they work there, like, oh, what's up with him, and just driving around like the studio in a golf buggy, and just with a big grin on my face, and it's not really uncool. I went there, and then I did loads of studio tours as well, And everyone's going, why are you doing that? Why would you bother? I'm like, because it's amazing. Come on. I did the Warner's one and stuff. It was brilliant. I did the Warner's one, and then I think I was watching The Swarm as well. So I actually, the set of The Swarm is in the Warner's tour.
Oh, right, with you, yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
And you said something really interesting that I wanted you to expand on when you're talking about what you consider a horror film. And you said, I can see the war film come and see as a horror film, and also I can see certain Ken Loach films as a horror film.
Yeah.
What Ken Loach films do you cite as being fitting into the horror movie idea in your...
Oh, Ladybird's the one that I think.
That's haunting. Yeah, that one I can't.
I haven't had an experience like that with with any horror film, I don't think. Like, a traditional horror film that it was I just found it really oppressive, and it was like the guy. I've watched it on Channel 4, and it was this, like when the ad breaks came, I was just going, oh god, thank God, just sell me some beans, and then it would start up again. And you go, oh Christ, and I think that was it to me. I think that's from that kind of list I did for film 4, wasn't it? And there was, I think, Come and See was on that list, but The Thing was on it as well, and some other bits and bobs. Ghost of the Civil Dead was one of them as well.
I think it's when he's getting taken away by is it like the immigration police or something, when they're in the hospital?
Yeah, it's when when she's burnt, the burns, yes. And they're pulling back the bandages, and they've all fused with the skin. It's like, oh man.
Yeah, I have that on the box set with Raining Stones and Riff Raff, which are my favorites, but that one I'm just leaving in the in the plastic.
Yeah, I won't be going back to that anytime too soon. Yeah.
You're producing Neil Maskell's new movie.
Yeah.
Can you say anything about that? I'm trying to imagine what type of film he'd make. I'm
an exec on it, so I'm not, that, which is a very much more minor version of a producer, but yeah, I've seen it. It's great, and I think I think whatever you think you're getting from him, it's not going to be that. It's something else, which is what's so great about Neil. He's kind of interested in all sorts of stuff. So it's, it's pretty bold, the film.
Okay, I'm excited. I have no idea what to expect from him.
Yeah, and I think you should go with a massive open mind to it. Yeah.
Okay, we're good. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Cheers, man. Thank you.
There you go. Ben Wheatley. What a cool guy. Did you notice how many questions I had to sneak in at the end there? Just couldn't let it go. Needed to know about Ken Loach as a horror movie director. Needed to know about Neil Maskell. That guy I find so terrifying and weirdly alluring. And The Meg 2. I'm excited. I think he's going to make a really fun, ridiculous, big budget franchise movie with hopefully lots of gore and crazy deaths. Okay, that's it. Deeper Into Movies podcast. This is really fun. Thank you for listening. Thank you for saying nice things about my podcast. Shout to my engineer, Ewan Hinselwood, and Telefon Tel Aviv, who makes all my beautiful music. Thanks again.